Welcome to the show. It is Tuesday. I'm Sean Stiers. Jesse Stiers is here, and also sitting backstage, eight days of growth on his face. I don't know. It's Brian Driscoll.
I got a beard and hair today, Sean.
You do.
You don't even know who I am anymore.
I don't remember like the last time I saw you with that much hair on top of your head.
In a long time.
Be happy because it's still mostly there. I don't see any noticeable spots on top of your head.
No, I got a full head of hair. I'm getting gray a little bit here.
You're getting gray.
I wear hats for so long that first time I did a show without a hat on, somebody was like, I literally thought you were bald. That's why you wore hats. I mean, no, I actually have nice hair. I just, like hats.
You got the frosted tips, Brian.
That's right.
God gave me these right here. Well, actually, I should say the message board and Notre Dame football gave me these.
I was going to say this last month has probably put you through a lot.
From the lead up to the playoff rankings to now has been I've aged about 13 years and my hair
haven't we all? Haven't we all?
Yeah.
All right, we got a lot in this show, and it's a relatively condensed show because we've got Notre Dame men's basketball tipping off at 7:00 tonight here on Sports Radio WSBT against the Miami Hurricanes. That means the pregame show starts at 6:30, so that means we're out a little bit before 6:30 instead of going all the way until 7:00. You will hear from the one and only Brady Quinn in a little bit in this hour. And Tuco had a comment. He said he better let you do this live or I'm going to have to throw his signed game-worn 2005 USC jersey in the fire. Well, get out your lighter fluid, Tuco, because it is pre-recorded. But I guarantee you this, there's a lot of good stuff that you're going to want to hear from Brady Quinn, pre-recorded or not. We talked about a lot of different things, including every Notre Dame fan's favorite topic, Notre Dame football on NBC. That will be addressed by Brady Quinn in this interview, among other things. So you've got that to look forward to. What's
Brady
that?
always brings it, Sean.
He does, man. That's what you got to love about him. He's always bringing the heat. He's ready to take on all the topics head on. Marcus Freeman's going to hold a press conference tomorrow. No, it has nothing to do with the timing of any NFL vacancies. We had some word that this was going to happen, and it is going to happen at 1:00 tomorrow afternoon. It'll be live on Notre Dame's YouTube channel. We sat around waiting all day going, okay, we've got the Brady Quinn interview that we're going to hear at about 5:30. What are we going to talk about in the first 15, 20, however many minutes of the show before we have the Brady Quinn interview? And, like a lot of other things, we've heard some different rumblings of possibly some more transfer portal commitments. And so I'm refreshing Twitter all day going, is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? So literally within 5 minutes of the show starting, it actually happens.
5 minutes after our show got over.
Exactly. Yeah. Brian Driscoll's show just ended. Jesse started filing in the chat. Here's Brian before I even was ready to go. So they finally got the literal biggest commitment probably of this transfer portal class, the defensive lineman, 6'1", 280-pound defensive tackle, all ACC from the Pittsburgh Panthers. Francis, is it Brewu?
Yep.
Brewu. Okay. Francis Brewu. And that is why Brian Driscoll is here. This, again, Brian, this is obviously a huge position of need in many different ways, and they were able to address it. And, of course, Brewu has the connection to Charlie Partridge, Notre Dame's new defensive line coach, who recruited him when he was still with the Pittsburgh Panthers before Partridge went off to join the Indianapolis Colts. So I'll let you kind of fill in any blanks you want from
Well, wherever you rank who's the best player, second best player, I mean, we all do those, right? Like Jesse's going to be breaking down film, ranking guys. I'm going to be breaking down film, ranking guys. And we all have our opinion. What can't be debated, in my opinion, is the defensive tackle was the biggest need in the portal.
Yeah.
And they needed a guy that could come in and step into the lineup day one, like Jared Dawson did last year. And this is a player that's a lot like Jared Dawson, to be honest with you. Body type wise, he's probably over 6'1". He's probably like one of those 6'1.5" kind of guys, but he's not real tall. Good length, really well built in the upper body. You watch the film against, for Pitt this year, and you're like, who's this little guy? And then first time I started breaking Pitt's film down, Sean, I'm thinking, okay, 6'1", he's going to look like Howard Cross. He's going to be a penetrator.
Mm-hmm.
He can certainly do that, but he is strong. And he was on the Bruce Feldman's freaks list for 2025. What was it, Jesse? Something like a 700-pound squat and I think like a 500-pound bench. Like
you beat me to the question because I was going to say that's when he's on the freak list. That's when you know it's like, okay, this is a guy that you want on your team, and he's in the 30s. It's not like he's all the way down there. He's in the top third of that list.
I think it was 24th is what I'm looking at now. Yeah, it was like. And Jesse, you got to be that way if you're going to be 6'1" and 280, and
you got to have more twitch to you if you're going to be that size.
And you got to be strong, and you got to be able to hold up at the point of attack. And I'm kind of looking through what Feldman posted now, Sean, and these are the strength numbers. He had a 685-pound squat. He bench pressed 475, and he vertical jumped 33 inches, which says a lot about that lower body explosiveness. He's also a true sophomore, which. I mean, maybe a different show for a different day. This is the hardest class that Notre Dame has had in getting transfers in the past. Are those like guys finishing their second year because they're like right in the middle of their process, which shows everybody likes to love to bang on Notre Dame's admissions department, but they've absolutely worked with the football team, not changing standards, but just saying, hey, we'll work with you in this new era. So I think this is
4 of 5 commits that they've got from the portal that have multiple years of eligibility.
Yeah, right? I think the only one that doesn't is the cornerback from Colorado.
Yeah.
They've landed Brewu is a true sophomore. Quincy Porter's a true freshman. Jaden Sanders is a true freshman. Keon Keeley's a junior rising senior. He's got 2 years of eligibility left. So yeah, they've all been underclassmen, so to speak. And I think that's important, but it more so the need is important. And it's a young man, as you mentioned, has some experience. He's a guy that is a disruptive player, great block destruction, which length and power are so important for an undersized offensive lineman. Howard Cross was really long, and that's something that helped him be effective despite being on the smaller side. I would argue that Francis is more powerful and a little bit more explosive out of his stance than what Howard was. Even as a true sophomore, his ability to get off blocks was outstanding. And he battled with Notre Dame, with Gerby Lambert all game long. I mean, that was and Gerby won some because he's a stud, and Francis won some. But this is a huge pickup. He fits the system. As you mentioned, there's familiarity with the coach. And, and he's an Ohio kid, so he's a northern kid. He's a Midwestern kid. That's going to be a good fit. Notre Dame saw him play. I think it says a lot that Notre Dame got on him the minute he jumped in the portal. Mm-hmm. And in the past, they've shown a tendency to like kids that they've seen up close and personal. Mm-hmm. You think about Riley Leonard and how, one of the biggest proponents of going after Riley Leonard was Al Golden and the defensive staff, because they're like, this guy's a nightmare to game plan for and to stop. And same thing, obviously, with this young man as well, with Francis.
I have two kind of questions that I wanted to run by you, Brian. How much do you think Charlie Partridge played in this? I know you talked about them seeing him and probably, liking what they saw in that game in Pittsburgh, but do you think that getting Partridge was kind of like that not a joint package, but kind of like probably the final kind of cherry on top that kind of tipped the scale for Francis?
I think it was the opposite of that, Jesse. I think him being there got them in the door and made the initial interest there. Then it was going to be about, do I fit? What's the NIL package going to be? What's the academic situation going to be? I think, and that is so important when recruiting portal kids. If you don't get that initial attraction, all the other stuff doesn't matter. Yeah. You can't get over the finish line. It's kind of the opposite of recruiting, right? Where it's the relationships are the thing that seals the deal. I think in the portal, the relationships are what get you in the door. Okay. And do I think was it a factor at the end of the day? Yeah, I think it was definitely a factor, but it was that first initial, oh, snap. Like, I have a relationship with this guy. Like, how long do you think Notre Dame spent getting to know DJ McKinney and Quincy Porter and guys like that, other than high school recruiting? It's, hey, there's already that connection there. I know this kid. I know his family. I've been in the home. I've been in the high school. He knows me. He knows what we believe in. That gets you in the door. And now it's like, okay, let's beat out Indiana. Let's beat out Ohio State. Let's beat out Tennessee. And now it's a big thing. And I think Ohio State not pushing hard for him helped as well. He's a Columbus native. And it might have been a little bit harder if Ohio State would have made a harder push. And so I think that helped out Notre Dame a ton because he was their number one D tackle target on the board.
Yeah.
When the minute he jumped in.
I mean, let's be honest. When you see Notre Dame already getting guys from the portal from Ohio State and Alabama, and now you
Michigan.
take a recruit, Michigan, but you also take a recruit, a portal recruit from, Ohio State, his hometown, and somebody that Ohio State really wanted. There's a little bit of satisfaction, I think, there, and they're all obviously good. But like back to his dimensions, you might say, well, he's a little bit undersized. And look, I'm not putting him in the Hall of Fame. So just like what I'm about to say, but Aaron Donald was the exact same size as this guy, 6'1", 280 pounds.
And very similar in terms of his strength, explosiveness.
That's what I was getting ready to say in terms of the physical attributes that you guys were talking about with the freaks list and everything else. There's a lot of similarity. And obviously they both went to Pitt as well. So,
yeah, I think people make a lot out of you have to have X size. Look at Ruben Bain and Akeem Messidor. And I'm like, yeah, look at Indiana. Their starting ends are 6'1", 260 and 6'1", 270. Their best D tackle, 6'3", 305. Notre Dame's 23 team had a defensive tackle All-American who was 6'1", 280 pounds, right? It's about fitting your style. In some system, like at Ohio State, I think they need somebody bigger. They do more two-gapping. Their inside guys are not making a ton of plays. They are eat up blocks and let the linebackers flow to the football. Notre Dame's system is more of we want you to penetrate, we want you to attack, we want you to be stout at the point of attack, and you're the first line of defense, literally. You're the closest ones to the football. We're going to let you attack. And I think that's why, you have to fit what you do. I mean, Jesse, you're a defensive guy, right? Over the years, you watch a lot of NFL football, a lot of college football. You played high school football. There have been great two-gapping 3-4 team defenses. There's been great one-gapping attacking 3-4 defenses. There's been great 4-3 defenses. There have been great 4-2-5 defenses. There have been great whatever the Bears ran. Was it the 46 defense? There's not one way to win. There's not one type of player to win with. What you need is you need talented players that fit the system that you want to run, or you need to fit the system to the players that you have. Yes. That's going to be the key. It's not looking for a type specifically. It's you need a type that fits what you want to do. And I think Francis Brewu fits exactly the type of aggressive attacking style that Notre Dame needs on their defensive line. I do think they'd like to get more beef, which is why they're looking at the kid from Oregon who's literally in 100 pass rush snaps last year had one pressure. And in over 100 run snaps, he had 6 run stops because his job is to do one thing: eat up space. Yes. So I think they'd like different body types, but there's no doubt that the penetrators, the guys that attack is of the utmost importance when you come to the every down type of D tackles.
So do you think after getting Brew, do you think they'd like one more interior guy at this point?
If it's the right guy, yes. I think they want to add one veteran that's got just that mass, just 320
Rubio then, basically.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what Gabriel brought to the table, and I think that's I don't think they're going to add another Francis Brewu. I think they're going to, if they add somebody else, it's going to be somebody that can come in for 15, 20 snaps a game and just eat up space, so we can let Drake Bowen and Jaden Osbury, Jaylen Sneed, Matt Framo, Kingston just fly to the football. I think that's what they would lead. But if they don't get that guy, I think getting him, to me, puts the final pieces on. You met your needs. Anything after what they have now is just icing on the cake.
So my next question would be, after yesterday, getting the additions in the portal, guys with a ton of experience, a guy that played all 13 games as a true freshman at Michigan, then you combine that with getting Brewu and Jaylen Sneed coming back today. I argued on yesterday's show, you could say they have the top secondary in the country. I think with Sneed coming back, you can argue they have one of the best linebacker units in the country. What does Francis Brewu do as that final piece to this defense and establishing them to maybe being, I don't want to get out ahead here, but I mean, I would consider Notre Dame a top 5 defense going into next season.
Talent-wise, there's no question about it. And you just look at how they perform down the stretch. I think what Francis Brewu does, Jesse, because I agree with you. I thought Notre Dame might have the best secondary in college football coming back next year before they added Joey O'Brien, Aiden Pouncey, Kari Adams, DJ McKinney, and Jane Sanders, the last 2 guys bring from the portal. even without Kingston, I think you could argue they have the deepest linebacker room in the country. And then Kingston's eventually going to come back when you talk about Drake Bowen, Jaden Alsbury, Jaylen Sneed, and Madden Faremo. And I think you could argue now that they have arguably the best defensive end rotation coming back. I think Oregon's in that conversation as well because Uyunglele is going to come back, and I think that was important for them. But you got Boubacar coming back and Bryce Young coming back. You've got Logan Thomas. You're bringing in 2 5-star defensive ends in the high school ranks, and now you've added Keon Keeley. So what you now have, Jesse, is I think Francis Brewu and getting Armo Mukum to come back were 2 huge things that says, okay, now we won't have a weakness, because I think you were going to be in trouble if you didn't get those 2 guys up the middle. And you and I both know, I don't care how good you are everywhere else, if you aren't good up the middle on defense, you're going to have a hard time having an elite defense.
Yeah.
And I think this gives them a chance to have a very good up the middle, which then allows those other aspects to – it's like a quarterback without a great
allows
offensive
the rest
line.
of your defense to play so much more free when you have a good interior defensive lineman.
Jesse, you played middle linebacker. I played quarterback. And it's the same thing. If my offensive line can't protect me, it doesn't matter how good I am. If your defensive tackles can't protect you, it doesn't matter how good you are.
Correct.
I mean, it's the same exact thing. And so now what you have on top of Elijah Hughes coming back, I think you're going to see Chris Burgess move inside. You've got Cole Mullins as a guy that I know staff is high on. You've got Davion Dixon. You've got the incoming freshmen, Tiki Hola and Elijah Golden. What you have now is strength through numbers. You know, there's talent there. There may not be a Jordan Davis on the roster, you know, the stud from Georgia from a couple years ago. But there wasn't that guy in 2025 either. And this is the first time since 2012 that Notre Dame held opponents to less than 100 yards on the ground rushing in a season during the regular season. So not since 2012. And the D tackles were a big part of that. There was no elite first-round draft pick, but you had like 5 guys that every week could just go out there and play ball at a high level. And I think with getting Francis Brewu and Armo Mukum to kind of want to recommit, want to come with what you have coming back, you've now solidified that part to where you can't neutralize the other strengths of that are there on this defense.
Real quick, because we're going to run out of time here. Have you heard anything in either direction about Jason Onye and the application for a 6th year?
I have, and I've been told that this might take a while. There's really no guidance from the NCAA in regard to time frame when they might know. I had somebody tell me that they're going to decide soon because the second semester starts. I've had people tell me they may not decide till the summer. With the NCAA, who flipping knows?
Down right away, but you know.
Yeah. Well, his situation was a little bit different, but
because they're
with
trying
the NCAA, you don't.
They're looking for a loophole to kind of try to get him
You
back.
don't know, and I think they're intentionally cracking down on 6-year grants to try to push back on this notion. And unfortunately, I think that's going to hurt Jason. The difference is the thing that they used to deny Trinidad will be harder to use to deny Jason, because there was documentation for the reasons
there's legit
that he wants to come back. Exactly. So there is documentation for what happened with him last year that will make his case more, I think, perceived as legitimate than what Trinidad Chambliss's case was. So that gives me a little bit of optimism. But when it comes to the NCAA, I never assume they're going to do the right thing, like ever.
All right, great stuff, Brian. Again, breaking news right as the show was starting today. Francis Brewu, the defensive tackle from Pittsburgh, all ACC defensive tackle, committed out of the transfer portal to Notre Dame today, a sophomore, so he's still got multiple years of eligibility remaining. And again, he rejoins Charlie Partridge, Notre Dame's new defensive line coach, who recruited Brewu when they were both at Pittsburgh. So really good news there. And then the kind of the side news, Jaylen Sneed, as Jesse referenced, linebacker for the Irish, did announce he's coming back to Notre Dame for his 5th year. Last ride, he posted on Instagram today. So that defense is just beefing up. All the moves, all 5 that Notre Dame has made so far on the defensive side of the ball. And I think there's something to what Jesse's saying. Like, this could easily be a top 5 type defense going into next year. So
this could be the most talented Notre Dame defense they've had since Lou Holtz was the coach.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think the thing that you talked about, Brian, is like, we're no longer good at just the ones. They're good 1 through 2 and really down into 3 now. And that's been unprecedented the last 2 decades here, I feel like.
Agree.
Thanks again, Brian. Appreciate it. And let everybody know you're going to be talking about it on your show again tomorrow.
Yeah, and we expect one more potential pickup between now and then. So we'll be at Marcus Freeman's press conference at 1. When we get back from that, we'll go live, probably about 2:30. We'll go live and we'll break down Francis Brewu more. We'll break down the other pickup we think they're going to get. And of course, if you go to boards.irishbreakdown.com, we're going to talk about it tonight. So
there you go. There you go. Much more to come. All right. Thanks again, Brian.
Thanks, guys.
We'll take a timeout. When we come back, the Brady Quinn interview comes your way. You'll hear from the former Notre Dame quarterback and host of Fox Big Noon Kickoff and Two Pros and a Cup of Joe here on Sports Radio WSBT, all about all those things and more. That is coming up next. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. We continue Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Again, the breaking news of the day just before the show started a little bit more than a half an hour ago. We found out that former Pittsburgh defensive lineman Francis Brewu has committed to Notre Dame. The 6'1", 280-pound former All-ACC defensive lineman just finished his sophomore season with the Pitt Panthers and now headed to Notre Dame. Okay, so now, as promised, Brady Quinn. I got to talk to him recently. We recorded an interview for all the people, who watch in the live stream, whether it's the Irish Breakdown YouTube channel or the WSBT Sports Radio WSBT YouTube channel. He had his camera off, so you're not going to be able to see Brady Quinn's chiseled jaw and his pretty face talking live to you. We had to kind of put a cover photo up, but you will be able to hear it. Like if you're listening on the radio or on the podcast, it's all audio. so it's nothing. But I'm just putting that disclaimer up there. But there's a lot of good stuff with Brady Quinn, and I'll let you hear that right now. Joined by the man who probably needs no introduction, but I'll go ahead and give him one anyway. He's a former Notre Dame quarterback and first-round NFL draft pick. He's an analyst on Fox's Big Noon Kickoff, and now he's also our new morning co-host on Sports Radio WSBT here in South Bend on the Two Pros and a Cup of Joe show, weekday mornings from 6 to 9, the one and only Brady Quinn. How are you today, Brady?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks for doing this. Before I guess get into the regular questions, I have a hard hitting one for you here. Back when you were still playing at Notre Dame, which has obviously been a little while, my wife went into a Subway. It was the one in the gas station that's kind of catty corner from the linebacker, like like right next to.
I think it's a Speedway, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. I wasn't sure about the gas station. I knew there was a Subway in there, but so she goes into Subway and she stood next to you in line at this Subway. And that's all I heard about for months afterwards was Brady Quinn and, like the whole thing. And so I told her last night that I was talking to you today. And the first thing she said was, well, see if he remembers the crazy lady who was mesmerized by at Subway.
I don't quite recall. However, I can guarantee you it was a chicken teriyaki sub, and I most likely was picking it up for either myself or one of the linemen. We had a couple guys, Dan Santucci and Brian Mattis, lived like in the apartment complex right behind that, or it could have been. Yeah, I didn't stop at that one very often, but most likely was for one of those guys that we were probably like taking some food to afterwards to hang out.
Very good. I had a feeling that that encounter might have meant more to her than it did you. So,
well, I've taken a decent amount of hits in my time too, so concussions may have played a little bit of a role in that.
There you go. Well, we're of course excited to have you, Two Pros and a Cup of Joe here. In South Bend. It always seemed to me like a natural fit, obviously, with you being one of the co-hosts of the show, along with LeVar Arrington and Jonas Knox. And I think most people probably know you from the Big Noon Show on Fox. How long have you been doing morning radio now?
So we started this show, Two Pros and a Cup of Joe, probably about 4 years ago now. Working into 5, actually, because Jonas Knox and I, we were doing a Sunday night show together for Fox Sports Radio, and I was working for SiriusXM during the course of the week where I could make it work within my, schedule for games, what eventually became, the halftime show that I'm a part of now on Fox. And so that was my schedule. And then this opportunity came about when Clay Travis decided to leave Fox Sports Radio and go take Rush Limbaugh's spot. So this opened up an opportunity for Jonas and I to be a part of it. LeVar came along as one of the co-hosts, kind of from really Don Martin, who looked at the combination of all three of us and thought that it would work well together. And LeVar and I had actually worked together prior to that at Fox for a little bit, but also at NFL Network. So I'd had experience with really both those guys, and the combination kind of stuck. And they let us essentially test it out for, felt like it was longer than, a few months. It was probably maybe even half a year before we got any indication that we'd be filling that spot permanently.
Oh, wow.
So it took a little while to finally get there, but yeah, I think we're now working on about 5 years.
Well, I think a lot of guys like you who do have a TV position, a high profile TV position, might be content to do the podcast once a week. And, if you're going to do something extra, there's a lot, obviously, as you well know, that goes into hosting a 3-hour morning radio show, between just the prep for it and the fact that you're getting up as early as you do 5 days a week. What drew you to it? What do you like most about doing a daily radio show?
Well, I've always been an early morning person, so that never really fazed me in any way. Like if I'm not up doing, part of my job or doing radio, then I'd be doing something else. But honestly, it started with Jonas. Like I've really grown to become such a close friend to Jonas. And this is one of those deals where I lived out my dream. I got to play, football, not only at the University of Notre Dame, which I was so blessed and privileged to do, but then, go and get drafted to the team that I grew up rooting for and play going into 8 years. So it was a dream of mine. It was honestly a blessing to experience all of that. And then you come along and meet other people and different facets of life. And Jonas loves radio. He loves sports talk radio. He's a solo host on the weekends. He's done overnights as a solo host for a long time. So when we started working together, I always felt like, hey man, let's try to take this as far as we can take it. And so he's been a big piece of it, quite frankly, as to why I've continued to do it. He's a good friend. I enjoy it doing it. And then as LeVar's come along too, like once you start working with people, you kind of build that camaraderie and you build that relationship with them where you feel like if you were ever to leave it, you'd be letting them down. And I think the other thing is it's fun. I mean, you're talking sports, and I love all sports. I grew up playing football, baseball, basketball.
Right.
So I love paying attention to all that stuff and really throughout the course of the year. So for me, it's been a natural, easy fit. And even as much as it is additional work, it also keeps you prepared. I'm always prepared to call an NFL game, which I had to do on a very short notice this past season. And it prepares you for talking college, NFL, and really everything that's going on.
How many games a year are you getting to broadcast these days? Because I know it feels like it's, a little bit maybe more infrequent. How many games are you getting to do?
Yeah, so it's really hard logistically to be able to call games, obviously for college, but also for NFL, given our slate and our schedule, and what our requirements are for our Fox Big Noon Kickoff show. So
right.
It only comes to about 2 weeks a year, most likely. This year was a little bit different again because of some of the circumstances surrounding one of the former employees at Fox, and that opened up a couple more opportunities. But it's not really written into my contract. It's just something that they know I love to do. And if there's a way that I could do more, we try to work it in, but it's just incredibly difficult logistically to get to where you need to go. And honestly, I just, that job, calling games, I take a lot of pride in it in my work. And I take a lot of pride in also the people who have the opportunity to work with those color analysts, because they're telling your story. They're telling your story as an athlete. They're telling your story as a coach. And I think it deserves the type of time and attention that someone can really, focus on full time, at least in my opinion, to truly tell that story in the best way possible. So there's times when I also know during the course of the season, it's really tough to do every job, and it's hard to do them all great. And if I'm going to do it, I'd like to do a great job at it. So sometimes it's just picking and choosing the spots too of when you can actually call those games.
I'm curious because anytime TV and the Notre Dame TV booth comes up, we get inundated with, you're one of probably the highest profile former Notre Dame player in the media, who's working in the media right now. And everybody always says Brady Quinn. Like when you talk to Notre Dame fans, do you hear that? Like, have you heard the large Notre Dame fan interest in wanting Brady Quinn to be calling Notre Dame football games?
I've heard of the interest in the past, and it's something that, look, I love my alma mater. I'd love for the opportunity to do something like that someday. It hasn't necessarily presented itself in any realistic way. And, in large part too, I think you look at who's typically called the games. It's, primarily been really, guys who are opponents of Notre Dame, whether it be an SC alum or a BC alum in the past, at least. So that's been more of the direction I think that NBC Sports is one to go. They're really the ones that control that. So
right.
I don't really have much of a say in that matter. It's a completely different network. And
Absolutely.
Until that opportunity presented itself, there's really not much I can say about it.
And let's be honest. I mean, you've got a pretty good thing going where you are at Fox with, as we've outlined, with everything that you do. And I'm curious with Big Noon Kickoff, like you launched it just a few years back, and I think there was some skepticism about, you guys were going to go ahead with game day, but your show, I think, continues to really grow in popularity, and the ratings have borne that out in the last few years. Did you have any doubts or hesitation at all when you're literally launching that from the ground floor up, when you're starting something brand new and you're going head to head with a legacy show like that?
Yeah, there's always going to be doubts about it. I mean, I think for me personally, when I was first actually asked to do it, and I don't know if this has ever become public, but I probably said no for like the first 3 months. And
really?
Yeah, in large part because I liked what I was doing. I really enjoyed calling games. I loved my producer, Bo Garrett. I loved my play-by-play partner, Joe Davis, at the time. And I didn't want to leave them high and dry. And I felt like, again, this kind of goes back to like the loyalty of working with Jonas on our show and really some of the others. Like, I just, once you've worked with someone for a while, it's like you kind of want to keep building with them. That's your team. So there was some hesitation in the beginning, but it had nothing to do with really game day. What game day has done is phenomenal. And as a player, I was a part of that. I was one of those, people who were, playing in those games where game day was there. And
sure.
I've obviously grown up knowing Kirk Herbstreit and some of the people who are there working at Disney. But I think it was more the attraction to looking what Fox had really done on the NFL side with their pregame show and the approach that they were taking. And I think that's sometimes what gets lost in actually what Fox has tried to create is they wanted to create a pregame show for college football that more mimics what they do on the NFL side.
Yeah.
And is it competing with game day? Of course. But we're not trying to like take everything that they're doing and implement it. In particular, even with the Dave Portnoy edition with Barstool, Pat McAfee is his own, universe. He's an incredible talent and entertainer. In no way was Fox trying to make Dave Portnoy into Pat McAfee. Like they're not even the same person in how they operate and
sure
how they entertain or attract people. So we really wanted to focus on saying, hey, what can we do that we feel like is still out there to garner attention? And one of the things is like having the voice of the fan. And Dave, I think, represents that not only from like a gambling perspective, but I think from like a passionate Michigan fan, which is tough to bear. I'll be the first to tell you. But it also is entertaining to a degree, and it draws attention. And as much as people, maybe don't like it, the reality is TV is about two things, and it's about invoking emotion. You either love it or you hate it, but either way, you're not indifferent. The second you become indifferent on TV, that's where you kind of lost it. So I think it's been fun to see the show grow, but also the manner in which it's grown and how we've gone about trying to attract attention in some ways, but also point out scheme, X's and O's, and other things of that nature.
Currently, ESPN, they're the sole TV partner of the college football playoff. They obviously sublet a couple games to Turner, but they still belong to ESPN. And I personally think that there would be a benefit of multiple TV partners, networks broadcasting playoff games like they do in the NFL when you have all of the networks involved. Maybe this is, too easy for since you don't work at ESPN. What do you think? Would college football, would the playoffs benefit from a structure like that?
Without a doubt. I look at it like this: the NFL obviously has all the power, so they can kind of dictate their media rights, and I think they want their story to be told from a bunch of different vantage points, and that's what you get where you've got Fox and CBS and NBC and obviously Netflix now has joined some of that. Amazon Prime or Amazon's part of that. And then ESPN as well. So you get this very, 360-degree view of how their game is presented. And then some people might like different broadcasts and different networks. Some might not. But the reality is, to your point, it is just ESPN. And so you only get that perspective. And I think my frustration is I'm watching 5 teams from the SEC get in the playoff,
right,
which is a committee, and this whole entire structure is really conjured up by ESPN. And, we're watching how things have played out this postseason. They've got one win, not including the intra-conference play against their own teams. I mean, they've really struggled. And this is the 3rd straight year we're not going to have an SEC champion. A 3rd straight year you've had, more teams that are a part of the Big Ten or more teams, outside of the SEC that are taking part in the semifinal games. I mean, it'll be a 3rd straight year in a row, again, without an SEC champ, which is different from what it's been in the past. And I think it's a changing of the times too, where unfortunately all we tend to hear about in the media is how great the SEC is, what a gauntlet it is.
Right.
Well, it doesn't appear to be that difficult when every time you play a conference in the postseason play, your teams aren't winning those games or your teams are going on to win a national championship. So I think there's a sense of bias, or at least a suspicion of it, whether you want to admit that or acknowledge that it exists. And that's where I think you need to bring in other TV partners to paint a different light or paint a different picture to what this sport really looks like.
Well, when you look at the selection process itself, I mean, Notre Dame has had representation on that selection committee over the years, but it feels like, all these conferences have direct representation, whether it's an athletic director on the committee, sitting athletic directors from whatever conference on the committee, former coaches who are on the committee. Does Notre Dame need to have more consistent representation on that committee, do you think?
No, I don't know that needs to be the change. I mean, I think the toughest thing for Notre Dame is the affiliation with the ACC and scheduling, 5 games a season. It hasn't worked out, I think, quite the way maybe we had hoped in regards to continuing to construct a strong strength of schedule. And that's, again, scheduling as an independent is tough on its own. But then when you look at the fact that you don't play that conference championship game, and obviously, depending on who you ask, it either matters when you lose, if you're BYU or some of the other teams that played in the conference championship game, or it doesn't if you're Bama, right? You just make it in regardless. But you still don't have that data point to be evaluated by. And so then you're going purely off, strength of schedule. Well, SC's down. That rivalry's not ever coming back because they're too scared to play. Yes, we've got some other great rivalries coming up, but they're home and homes. And so it becomes a little bit more difficult if you don't run the table, or if you don't, if you can't become, if you're anything less than 11-1 team, to be able to really make your case when all these other conferences are touting their strength of schedule, touting within the conference, touting the, conference championships, these other things they have, going for them. So I look at it and say, I don't know if we did any representation necessarily on the committee, because then, Notre Dame's always going to be looked at as bias. I just think we need to continue to keep trying to schedule as strong of a schedule as possible. Bring back some of those old Big Ten rivalries. We get Michigan State back next year. We used to play them every year. Purdue used to be the case. We used to play them every year. Michigan, et cetera. And I know, Michigan State, Purdue are down, but still, at least you've got more common opponents to some of the other conferences that you're ultimately competing with in order to get Notre Dame into the playoff when you're trying to compare those resumes at the end of the year.
Any of those teams that you'd like to see, they signed the fairly long-term deal with Clemson anyway, and with USC going off. Is there anyone that you would like to see, I guess, more permanent, in terms of being on the schedule? Michigan. For sure.
Always Michigan. I mean, that's a game, that's a rivalry that, it never should have went away. Those are two of the top, winningest or all-time winning programs. They recruit against each other, two high academic institutions, close in proximity. It just makes way too much sense. And I think that's the game that every single year they should play. And by the way, unlike SC, I don't think Michigan's scared. I think they're the type of university that would sign up for that sort of deal. I know they already have again in the future to bring that back, but I think it's like 2033, 2034. So it's a ways off. Yeah. That would be the first one that I'd go after that I think needs to be brought back.
I'd love to see it. I mean, because I think the proximity and, so you've got a lot of Michigan fans as close as South Bend already is to Michigan. There's a lot of Wolverine fans in this area. And obviously it's going to be, like there always just seemed to be a different kind of buzz in the atmosphere when you guys played Michigan back in the day.
Without a doubt. And again, you're kind of protecting, some of those main staples of the, not only historic tradition between the two schools. I mean, if you really want to get in the weeds on the history, there's more than just kind of the rivalry, if you will, between the two schools and why Notre Dame's not a part of the Big Ten, which used to be the Western Conference and all of that, dating way back to the early 1900s. But there's a lot of reasons to do it. And I think also, similar style of play. It's almost a measuring stick, I think, for both those schools to see where they're at. And again, they're not going to have a head coach there ever that doesn't want to try to play in this sort of matchup. So I would love for that one to be brought back every single year. But again, scheduling has become a lot more difficult for Notre Dame as being one of the only, two independents that are left in the FBS.
Marcus Freeman drew a good amount of NFL interest recently, both last year and even more, I think, in this cycle. You obviously played at both levels. What do you think for a guy like Freeman, if he were to make the move from college to the NFL, what would be the biggest adjustment for someone like that?
I think the hardest thing is, talent is so equated. Where at the college level, it's so much about recruiting. It's so much about maybe retention of some of the guys in today's era of the transfer portal, of making sure you can bring those guys back you really want to bring back. to create the roster you need. It's different at that level. Yes, you need talent, and there's definitely some NFL franchises that are devoid of it or have some, glaring misses. But it's just much more of a schematic game. It's much more of an X's and O's game. And I think, not that is that's just one of the biggest differences. Sure. So you have to adjust to that. I think, him being a defensive minded head coach, sometimes, especially when the guys first take the head coaching job, they're handling one side of the ball because there's so much that's on your plate, as a head coach, and then you throw on, defense as well. You need someone else you trust, on the other side that's going to be almost an equal part to you in a way. And then you got to work with, a general manager and how he sees things depending on the structure of that organization. So it just, ultimately it's a little different. You got an owner who's might be involved or might not, depending on the type of organization. Do they have a headset on or listen to everything? They might be coming down and dictating to you things. At the college level, you don't have that. You are the one calling the shots. You have autonomy, ultimately. Yeah. There's no one paid more than you there. So it's an adjustment in that sense where I think a lot of coaches take on opportunities to go be a head coach somewhere, and they realize whatever was being told to them on the way in is drastically different than what the realistic, day-to-day life is, when you are the head coach of that team. I think college football coaches definitely have an advantage in that sense, as far as that they have a little bit more control than I think what you have at the NFL level, because there's a lot more people who are involved in the organization who've got to say in some of the decision making.
We've heard that since Freeman's been here at Notre Dame, there's been a lot more involvement with former Notre Dame players. How would you compare that to past coaches, and how important is that to you?
Yeah, look, I think anytime that you've got the opportunity to, bring back past players from different generations or different classes, it's huge. And it's one of the things that, clearly he's made it more of an effort to do so. And that's, I think, important for not only the history of the school, but to keep kind of building, that network and building the support, regardless of what era you played in, regardless of, who your head coach was. That kind of ultimately falls in the lap of whoever the head coach is at any alma mater for that matter. So not everyone sees it the same way. I think Marcus does. I think he understands that, and he realizes in the greater scheme of the bigger picture, like, you want everyone to want to come back and keep rooting on these players. That's the support system that they deserve.
Brady, I don't know how much you're paying attention to what's going on in the transfer portal. It's pretty much swallowed up our world here in the last week, since it opened up. I'm curious, there was no transfer portal back when you were playing. It was like, if you transferred, you pretty much had to sit out a year, before you could go anywhere, and there was no NIL and all that kind of stuff. So if you went back to when you were playing, Tyrone Willingham has just been fired. You don't know what's going to happen with your head coach. You don't know that it's going to be Charlie Weis yet. If there was a transfer portal back then, would that have potentially impacted Brady Quinn's future at Notre Dame?
Well, I can honestly say I don't know. It wasn't something that was really presented to me necessarily. And
right.
I think it's hard in today's age to not, think that if the sort of money that's being thrown around the way it has, and, you had as much flexibility to move, like maybe, back then, maybe I would have. Like, I really don't know. It's not something that I've had to think about a ton, because I was very fortunate enough to, have someone like Charlie Weis come be involved. Our athletic director at the time, Kevin White, really had me along with a handful of other guys who were on this committee that, he really kept us in the loop of what the next head coach looked like. So, we felt like we were a part of that decision-making process. And we felt like we were a part of the group that ultimately decided who the next head coach would be. And I think that was kind of powerful too at that time, to feel like you had a much better sense of, what your future looked like. You could have, put your name in the portal and gone on visits and heard everyone recruit you again, and some being truthful and some lie to you. But in reality, for me, like, I always put a large precedent on saying I want to get my degree. I want to get my education from Notre Dame. And obviously I wanted to finish what I went there to do, because I loved the school. I loved the university. But, again, I'm not naive enough or ignorant enough to lie to you and say, hey, if someone's throwing, $5 million at you at that stage of your life, would you have just said no instead? It's like, well, that's a much more complicated conversation.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a different world. I mean, it really is. And Man, I feel for some of these players and parents because, there's sometimes, where it's too good of an offer to turn down in the game of football. We have so many unknowns in the future. And for some of these players, they don't want to be in the portal. They're going in the portal because, they're being told they don't have an opportunity at the place they're at.
Yeah.
So, and the last thing I just say on the whole portal is I know there's Notre Dame fans who want, Notre Dame to get every single player in the portal and all that stuff. But it's like, ultimately, we at the NFL level, which has already got this model in place, how many times do we ever see a team that we say won the offseason in free agency in the NFL actually equate to anything significant?
Right.
And the truth of the matter is, it's not, to me, how you build and construct a roster. I think you can supplement in some guys and some things that maybe you feel like you need, or you don't have much depth here or there. If you have the opportunity to really get a great player you feel like would be a good fit for your culture, that makes sense. But I don't panic about it. I mean, Notre Dame's so blessed to have so many of the talented players that they have. And I think, I take pride in, and being a guy who was there for 4 years, and I'm sure many of the guys do, much like, CJ Carr now or whoever else you want to point to, like being homegrown kids, guys who they decided they wanted to go there out of high school and they stayed there all the way through. They weren't there as a mercenary necessarily.
Right. I'll play that on a loop and see if that helps. There's a lot of unease right now, as you can probably imagine. I'll let you go. How about Charlie Weiss Jr., by the way? I think like this is a guy, like I saw a photo that somebody posted of him the other day, like holding up cards on the Notre Dame sideline back when you were still playing. Could you have imagined that Charlie Jr. would be this big of a rock star, a rising star in the world of college football back then?
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising because back then he knew the offense, just a young kid. I mean, he has been so ingrained in the game and really sports for such a long period of time. I mean, I used to go see him play some of his little baseball games, back as he was growing up. And and I got to say this, like, I'm incredibly proud of just the man he's become, because as other coaches decided to leave that team and they weren't planning on going back, Charlie was really the lead catalyst in going back and saying, this isn't right. Like, I'm coaching this through until the last game. And then at that point in time, I'll move on to LSU. But he was the one that really put Lane Kiffin in a position where Lane had no choice. He was either going to lose his offensive coordinator, or he was going to let him go there and finish the job that he had set out to do at the beginning of the season. And so credit to Charlie, because I know the schedule he's been on the past few weeks. He's been basically game planning and practicing and meeting, and then as soon as it's been done, he's been flying down to Baton Rouge for transfer portal meetings and flying right back up that same night and getting up early and starting all over again with the game planning for the games. And that's been going on for weeks now. So it's a credit to him and how he's been able to balance all of it. I know it's a disappointing loss for them, but it was an incredible run. And he's, he's been handling the offense for a long time. A lot of people, give Lane Kiffin a lot of credit, but I remember when they were at FAU and I went to visit in some of the meetings, it was Charlie. He was the one up there who was leading the meetings. I don't even think Lane was in the building at that time in the morning. So Charlie's been calling the plays, and he's been running this offense for a long time.
Maybe he was doing yoga. Who knows?
Well, I know a couple blue martinis in South Florida who would say they ran into Philly freshwater. So
I'm sure.
Yeah.
All right. He's Brady Quinn, one of the main analysts on Fox's Big Noon Kickoff, and of course one of the co-hosts as well of Two Pros and a Cup of Joe, weekday mornings from 6 to 9 a.m. here on Sports Radio WSBT. Brady, I appreciate you doing this. A lot of great stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Excited to be on the airwaves there in South Bend.
All right, awesome. That is Brady Quinn, former Notre Dame quarterback, and again, of course, the co-host of Two Pros and Cup of Joe, our new morning show here on Sports Radio WSBT, 6 to 9 a.m. weekdays, and one of the hosts of the Big Noon Kickoff as well. And so I saw a couple people just jumping in the process on the YouTube channel. No, that was not live. We did have to record it. That's why you just saw Brady's still photo face up there. He had his camera off when we were doing the interview. But again, I thought a lot of really good stuff in there from Brady Quinn. We got to touch on a lot of different topics, and we will definitely talk about some of those answers that he gave later on this week on the show. We've got a press conference with Marcus Freeman coming up 1:00 tomorrow afternoon at Notre Dame. Big news today. Francis Brewu Pitt defensive lineman committing to the Fighting Irish, Jaylen Sneed, announcing that he is coming back for his 5th year at Notre Dame. And again, if you only caught part of that interview with Brady Quinn, of course, you can always go back and look on the YouTube channels, whether it's Irish Breakdown or Sports Radio WSBT or the podcast platform as well. We will take a timeout. When we come back, rapid fire. We're going to be done by 6:30 tonight, so don't go anywhere. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Rolling into hour number 2, Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. It is rapid fire time as we are locked and loaded and ready to go again. The news of the day today, Notre Dame got a commitment from Pittsburgh defensive tackle, former Pittsburgh defensive tackle, Francis Brewu, committing to Notre Dame. So they finally get their interior defensive lineman. Let's start off with that, Jesse. How big a deal is that for Notre Dame, getting Brewu?
Yeah, I think like we were alluding to when Brian was on earlier, I think it's that final piece to the puzzle along Notre Dame's defense. I think they're going to have a top secondary in the country. They're going to have a top linebacker unit in the country. They had top defensive end rotation in the country. And now with the addition of Brewu and Armel Mukam coming back, you solidified, to me, the most important part of the defense. Those interior trenches, guys who can eat up double teams, who can get penetration. And when you have studs like that, it just makes everyone's job at the second and third level a lot easier. You know, when you can get pressure with your defensive linemen, that means your corners and safeties have to cover that much less or not as long, essentially. When you have guys, defensive linemen who, you know, eat up double teams or guys that the offensive linemen have to get hands on, it just allows your linebackers to flow a lot more, consistently to the ball and make plays. So, to me, it all starts up front, and that's why Miami and Indiana are playing for a national championship, because I think they have the best trench units in the entire country.
If Notre Dame wants to be back there, if Notre Dame wants to be not just in the college football playoff, but back in a national championship game a year from now, they've got to be dominant up front. You know, we think that they're going to have a really good offensive line, especially if you get some key guys like Charles Jagasaw back, but it's got to be on the defensive line as well. And this was the biggest question mark that they had on this interior of the defensive line. And they already added a guy like Keon Keeley to the edge. And now you get a piece like this, especially when you still don't know, as we talked about in the first hour of the show, you don't know what's going to happen with Jason Onye. And as good as you think as Armel Mukam can be, he still has to show some more consistency and prove that he can be that guy. And so to get a guy like this, like Brewu, with 2 years of experience, an all-ACC performer, you talked about it. Again, you mentioned this, the fact that he was on Bruce Feldman's Freaks list, and I think he's like a top 25 guy on the Freaks list, which means, you know, he's got a lot of strength, a lot of athletic ability. This is a guy like the play of Howard Cross, but an elevated level, I think, that goes along with it with a guy like Brewu coming in. So 10 out of 10 for me. They had to have this, and we'll see if they go out and maybe land even one more interior defensive lineman. If they get the right kind of guy, they would. I don't think they're going to add a body just to add a body, but if they can get a guy who they think can bring them some impact, they would still go out and do it. So it's very exciting that they're able to do this. And now you've got 5 transfer portal commits in the last couple of days, and these are all impact type guys potentially. So that's pretty exciting. And they're also all on the defensive side. So you still need a kicker. And again, I think that you still would probably like to add at least an interior defensive lineman, and you might still get another wide receiver as well. On top, I guess I said that they are all on the defensive side. They're not all on the defensive side because they got Quincy Porter, the wide receiver, yesterday as well. How about Jaylen Sneed announcing he's coming back? Last ride he posted on his Instagram. Again, how key do you think this is to getting Jaylen Sneed back for the Irish defense?
Yeah, I think that this is the kind of final piece to the linebacker room for Notre Dame. You know, obviously a guy that has been on, you know, a lot of people's radars ever since joining Notre Dame. I think a guy that a lot of people anticipated to play earlier and have more of an impact early on in his career. But I really feel like the last couple of seasons he's took some big strides in his development as a linebacker. I still think that there's some things that he overall, you know, you would like to see him better at. And I think that this last season could really prove beneficial, not only for himself, but again, kind of round out a really good linebacker room at Notre Dame, a guy who's going to see a lot of consistent snaps. You know, I don't want to say that he was this like deal breaker type of guy, but again, he just kind of completes or rounds out that linebacker room. He gives you a good rotation. And I think that's something that you've seen on the Notre Dame defense, whether it's linebackers or defensive line. It's not about just guys being the starters and that's it, and they're going to be out there every snap. You need guys to give your starters some breaks, to be more in some situational downs And I think that's what Jaylen Sneed is. And I think he could potentially work himself into a starting role.
Yeah, he played the fourth most snaps of Notre Dame's linebackers this past season. Drake Bowen played 585. Sneed played 313. But you also don't know what Kingston Viliamu-Asa's status is going to be going into the season. So I think that this is really important to get a guy like Sneed back, especially, we might underrate it a little bit. They're going to have a new position coach. They were going to have a new position coach no matter what, with Max Bulla moving on to Michigan State to become co-defensive coordinator there. But so I think that it's really important to have all that consistency coming back again, especially when you don't know exactly what you're going to get from KVA going into the season. Good in pass coverage. So, he's shown some pass rush. I started to slur my pass rush, kind of in there together, but a guy who I just think the consistency is one of the key things for him and all that he brings coming back. The Shark 83 asks if he has got his degree yet. I would hope so, since he's going into his 5th year. I would hope that he's got his degree, but we don't necessarily track degrees from this side. Frank in the YouTube chat says Indiana will sign every year like this year as long as Mark Cuban is pumping millions into the program and telling the recruits that if they either sign now or the offer is pulled. Now, that is a Cignetti thing. I've seen a lot of people kind of use this, like the Mark Cuban thing. Oh, that's the only reason Indiana's doing this. Look, Mark Cuban.
They go hand in hand. You got to be good to get money like that.
Right. All these programs have them. Mark Cuban just happens to be a very high profile donor. Like, do you think that Oregon doesn't have a pretty high profile?
Where do you think Texas Tech is getting all this money?
That's right. Like any program now to be successful, they've got to have it. So it's not like just because Mark Cuban is attached, like that sets him apart. Yeah, he's writing bigger checks and they're really successful. But Notre Dame has them as well. Like this money doesn't just come out of nowhere. Every program has got them. It's not just Indiana. And VR asks, does Notre Dame enter next season ranked number 1?
I mean, let's just seriously, let's go about this on paper. You've got CJ Carr returning on quarterback, at quarterback. He's right now tied with Arch Manning for best odds to win the Heisman next season.
Favorite. Yeah.
You got an offensive line with a ton of talent. Yeah, you lost a couple of guys to the NFL draft, but they're just going to reload on talent. You've gotten a stud wide receiver out of the portal on top of a pretty solid wide receiver group as is. You're going to reload at tight end. Now let's flip to the defensive side of the ball. You've got a ton of experience in what Brian and I are considering one of the best secondaries in the country. You've got probably at least 2-3 guys at the linebacker position who are going to get drafted. So I'd consider them a top linebacker group. You got a ton of now talent along the defensive line at defensive end and defensive tackle. I will go down right now and say I guarantee they're a top 5 team. I don't know about one, but I guarantee I would put almost everything I own on them being a top 5 team.
I would be shocked. I completely agree. I give this like maybe a 7.5 or 8 out of 10 would be my confidence that they could be number 1. But I think you've got to look at this. If Indiana wins the national championship, even though they're losing Mendoza and they'll have some other losses obviously as well, when you look at what Cignetti did from year 1 to year 2, and the fact that this is Mendoza's only year, it's his one and only year at Indiana, I think that you're going to be hard pressed not to see Indiana as the number 1 team going into next year, just because Cignetti has already shown that he can the entire program basically up from scratch, and yes, with some NIL help from the Mark Cubans of the world. But the fact that he was able to plug in some key spots from the transfer portal, and I think there's going to be confidence that he can do it all over again, regardless of who they end up with. So, yeah, I think Notre Dame will be top 5. Again, I'd give it a 7.5 or 8 that they could be number 1 going into next year. But most likely, I would see it being Indiana instead. Okay, a lot of football topics that we want to get to. This is Jesse's last day on the show, by the way, this week. Fill in the blank. The defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles are out of the playoffs after their wild card loss to the 49ers. And it's blank that offensive coordinator Kevin Patullo is catching the bulk of the blame.
Yeah, it's completely misguided that he's catching a lot of the flack or the majority of the blame. And I don't know if you saw this, but I meant to send it to you before the show. The Eagles are moving on from him as offensive coordinator.
Oh, really? I didn't see that before.
And it's not necessarily he's fired. I still think he's going to be on the staff. It's just he's no longer going to have the title of offensive coordinator. Yeah, very interesting. But, I kind of want to approach this how we did on last week's show when we were talking about the Miami game. You got three players, Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts, and this offensive coordinator. Out of 100, where do you place – you got 100 points. Where do you place that blame at? My blame would go 50 points, Jalen Hurts, 40 points. No, I'd go 60 points, Jalen Hurts, 30 points, Nick Sirianni, and 10 points, the offensive coordinator. I just have to be honest about this. Jalen Hurts is closer to being a backup quarterback than he is a top 5 quarterback in this league. And anyone who still wants to argue that or have discourse about that, I'm removing your football card immediately because it's just not valid anymore.
We debated this summer whether it might have even been in the spring after they won the Super Bowl, whether or not Jalen Hurts was a top 5 quarterback because there are all these people wanting to put him in the top 5. We didn't have him in our top 5. Why? Because of the roster. And there is zero excuse. I don't care who's calling the plays. I don't care that that Jalen Hurts has had a different offensive coordinator every year. This man has been in the NFL for 6 years now? This guy has been around. He's been to 2 Super Bowls and he has won 1. If Jalen Hurts can't figure it out himself with those weapons that he's got on the field, with the best running, maybe one of the 2 best.
You got 2,000-yard receivers. You got a 1,000-yard running back.
The bulk of this, I agree. 60% goes to Jalen Hurts, and I would agree with your percentages. Sirianni still is to blame for a lot of this as well.
He should have taken over a long time ago. He knows what this offense should have looked like and what it did the last 2 seasons.
They played like a team throughout the entire season. They played like a team with no intensity that was pacing itself until they got to the playoffs. And then they got to the playoffs. They couldn't flip the switch, and they're out. And a large part of it goes to the fact that you have a quarterback who is not that good a passer. And when he has to make – now, there were drop balls the other night, but there are drop balls in every NFL game, so it's not limited to that. You need to be able – if he's a franchise quarterback, if he's a top 5 guy, you've got to be able to put the game on his shoulders. And Philadelphia obviously didn't have that confidence to do it. And the receivers, you can see every time they talk to A.J. Brown and, they did not have confidence in Jalen Hurts. I think it comes down to that.
And I spat with a few people on Twitter. They were talking about his offensive line being hurt. I don't buy it. Every NFL team goes through injuries, and if you're a top 5 quarterback, you overcome those things. So, and then other people were talking about, Patula's just calling 4 verts. Well, why do you think? Because Jalen Hurts can't run specific plays in the playbook.
It's the only throw he can make 9 times out of 10.
And I'm being completely honest when I say this, and I you can go listen to Chris Sims as well when he talks about this. LaShawn McCoy is even outing Jalen Hurts now. The biggest Eagles, fanboy there is. There are plays that Jalen Hurts refuses to run because he physically can't make those throws. He cannot read defenses enough to make those progression type throws. And then you want to take out the fact that he doesn't even want to run in RPO schemes anymore. And so that affects Saquon Barkley.
Which would benefit both him, and Saquon Barkley.
And so now you're limited. If I'm Patula, I'm saying I'm getting out of here because why would I want to coach at a place where I can't even use my full offensive playbook and arsenal, and then I get blamed for the reasons that this team is doing bad? No, it's the quarterback position. And I'll even give out some free freaking advice to the Eagles front office. Why don't you just draft Trinidad Chambliss? Because he's everything that you want in Jalen Hurts and everything that Jalen Hurts can't be. He's mobile, and he has a way better arm, and he can actually throw the ball downfield.
Hard to disagree with that. Exactly. Like we have seen Jalen Hurts' ceiling. If he can't do more in that offense with the best offensive line in the NFL, two of the best wide receivers, they're both at a minimum top 15 wide receivers in the NFL, and one of the two best running backs, best breakaway threat in the NFL at running back. Like what are we even doing? And the fact that they got a great defense on the other side, but you can't score more points than that. Like
the thing is too is that the Eagles, I don't understand, because the Eagles are in such a right now. They have so much void in contracts that they've kind of, pushed back into 2027 and 2028, their cap hit in some void years. And so if you're not maximizing this window right now that you've put all into, why are you trying to do this with a quarterback that is so limited? Because I promise you, if you had Matt Jones at quarterback this season, I think they beat the 49ers in the first round. I think they at least add 2 or 3 wins. You have a full arsenal playbook that you can now go to.
Fill in the blank. Mike Tomlin stepping down after 19 years as the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach is blank.
It's a loaded situation, because I understand as Steeler fans, you haven't won 7 straight playoff games. Okay, that's what it is. But look at what he's had to do. What do you expect from a guy that has quarterbacks of Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett? Like, what is a guy supposed to do with that?
He got to the playoffs this year with 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers. He got to the playoffs last year with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields as his 2 quarterbacks. Sean Payton didn't go to the playoffs when he had Russell Wilson. Mike Tomlin did. And he got to the playoff 2 years ago with Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, and Mason Rudolph all starting games, multiple games. Each of those 3 guys started multiple games for the Steelers 2 years ago, and he got him to the playoffs. Like, I completely agree with what you're saying. You can talk about the fact that they've lost 7 straight playoff games over the last 9 years, but just the fact that they got there, and really that's the Pittsburgh Steelers' biggest problem, is Mike Tomlin is such a good coach that he's getting them to the playoffs, and as a result, their draft pick is always, bottom third, because they're always in the playoffs. They're in the bottom third of the first round all the time. They're not able to get big enough studs out of it. I do want to mention this, and we'll get to what you're trying to show me there in just a second, but piggybacking with this, where did it go? Oh, here it is. D-Rock Irish, and Jesse mentioned this early. Adam Schefter tweeted this: in spite of interest from several NFL teams, Marcus Freeman is still expected to remain at Notre Dame for the 2026 season, per sources. So you can rest easy with that. And I know a lot of people, when they saw this press conference with Marcus Freeman coming up tomorrow, that'll be at 1:00, they announced it right after the Mike Tomlin news. And a lot of people, I think, were concerned about the timing, but this press conference had been planned. And from what we understand, it was actually moved around a little bit this week, but it is going to be tomorrow at 1:00. So we have new news.
Breaking news.
Mylan Graham, the former Ohio State wide receiver, has now also committed to Notre Dame. So you've got 2 former Ohio State Buckeye wide receivers
5
who are going to be
stars.
part of 5-star guys, part of Notre Dame's wide receivers room, along with CJ Carr next season. What's that do for you?
Woo! I'm fired up now, baby. I wish that we could go back 2 weeks and ask all those bozos how they're feeling now. The people who wanted to burn the ceiling down and tell you, everything was falling apart at Notre Dame. This is a home run portal class. We were told Notre Dame was going to go all in this 2026 season just based off of where their roster is at, how loaded it is in terms of talent. And now it seems like everyone that they keep getting from the portal is just 5-star after 5-star after 5-star. This is the year. If this is Notre Dame going to that national championship 2 years ago, that was premature. This was always the year. And I hate that we have to now front load all these expectations, but with the schedule they have coming up this season, and the roster that they have. You've got an experienced quarterback. You've got an experienced coaching staff. Now Chris Ash has a year under his belt. You got one of the best offensive coordinators in all of college football. You have one of the best head coaches in all of college football. You upgrade along the defensive line position, getting Partridge. This is the year. Like, if you want, as a Notre Dame fan, this should be the year that you feel the most confident that they can make this run.
Quality over quantity. That's what it comes down to. You've loaded up. You've got three former five-star guys in this haul. The two of them wide receivers from Ohio State, which is basically wide receiver U when it comes to college football. You got Keon Keeley, the defensive end from Alabama, who obviously originally committed to Notre Dame and then decommitted and went to Alabama. You're getting him back. You got Francis Brewu committing today, and you've got a couple of defensive backs as well. And really, so this is 6 guys now that they have gotten out of the portal after everyone was just totally freaking out because, they weren't getting anybody and, it took a little bit longer. Yeah, they still need a kicker. That's for sure. Really, again, they've got 6 guys now. You add a kicker, that's 7. You could see maybe 2 more guys on top of that. That's it. Like, everyone was, like these scorecards. Well, they've lost 19 guys from the portal. They haven't got any commitments. Well, now it's 19-6, but there's every argument that the 6 that they've already got outweigh the 19 that they lost because of all, basically depth guys that you lost in the portal. All right, Jesse, we're going to have to wind it up with that. Anything you want to say in 15 seconds or less?
15 seconds or less. I hate the Eagles. I'm glad that they lost. I'm always here for their downfall. Same with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I just love this portal class. They're knocking it out right now.
All right, me too. Great stuff. Marcus Freeman press conference, 1:00 tomorrow. Vince and I will be here. We'll have some comments from that press conference, and we will talk about them. Jesse, enjoy your time off. We will talk to you later. We'll talk to everybody tomorrow. Notre Dame men's basketball coming up. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com.